The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. We're taught to look outward for knowledge, but what if the most reliable data comes from the silence within? For Karen Newell, that's not philosophy, it's practice and the focus of a lifelong inquiry into consciousness. The co-author with neurosurgeon Dr. Eben Alexander of Living in a Mindful Universe and innovator in the emerging field of brainwave entrainment audio meditation, Karen is the founder of Sacred Acoustics, a company that brings physics, neuroscience, and the mystery of mind together through her research into how sound can shift awareness, calm the body, and open access to states that science is only just beginning to map. Her 10 best books trace that same arc, from the cosmic patterns of Richard Tarnas's Cosmos and the Psyche to the stillness of Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul, mapping a journey from studying consciousness to living it. Karen Newell, welcome.
Thank you, Sandie. It's so great to be here with you.
So how did you find the process of narrowing down a lifetime's reading to just 10 books? Was it easy or a challenge?
That was interesting because you asked specifically for spiritual books. And of course, you think of, the Dalai Lama or some scripture when you think of spiritual, but I had to really think of books that shaped my spiritual view of the world. And so it was really a fun experience, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we do really mean inspirational books because it's, it doesn't have to be a spiritual book that can move you along the spiritual path. Insights are everywhere, but yes, we call it the No BS Spiritual Book Club. So we have to say spiritual books, but good. Well, I'm glad that it wasn't too onerous a task for you. Some people think it's going to take them forever to do.
Well, I've been reading my whole life. So to me, books are just part of my life, and narrowing it down was the hard part. I had a huge list and I just had to pick the ones that really told the story that you kind of just summarized.
Do you remember the first spiritual inspirational book you read?
Spiritual inspiration book. The book, it was spiritual for me. It was The Secret Garden. Who is that? Frances Hodges Burnett, I think.
Yeah, Burnett, yeah.
I read that book so many times. It was magical to me. And it really spoke about love and connection, right? And people who aren't necessarily out in the, I think it was about a boy who was sick and somehow he gets healed by going into a garden, a secret garden. And to me, that was just very magical. Love that book. Still think about it today because I'm a gardener too. So it really is helpful.
So would you say that book actually kind of kept your mind open to maybe magic or, things that we can't necessarily explain?
Very possibly. I mean, I read C.S. Lewis books too, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, all kinds of kind of magical books. But Secret Garden had heart in it. And I think that heart, that love, I don't know if it talked about love, but it felt like love to me. That's what stuck with me.
Yeah. So your first book, Cosmos and Psyche, Intimations of a New World View by Richard Tarnas, published in 1996. Now, before you tell us about this book, is your list chronological? Have you put them in the order that you read them?
No, not in the order that I read them, but in the order I felt that the topics flowed.
Okay, brilliant, good. Okay, so tell us about this book. What was it about it that really touched you?
Well, Cosmos and Psyche, I probably read on the later side of these books. So I'm glad you asked. It came out later, and I read it maybe 10 years after it came out. And astrology was always interesting to me. Another book, Linda Goodman's Sun Signs, many people are familiar with because that was our kind of first entry into astrology. And when I look at my little paperback copy of that, I still have it. I have names of all my friends and family and each sign they were. And I was just really taken aback at how accurate sometimes those descriptions would be. And so I followed astrology. And when I learned about Rick Tarnas's book, Cosmos and Psyche, he took a whole different angle of astrology. Instead of very personal, he made it for the whole world. So he wrote a book that looked at the transits of the outer planets. Those are ones that have longer effects, supposedly. We'll just call this maybe. And he found all these patterns. So when certain planets were near each other, we were going through a renaissance, or maybe we were going through a dark age when other certain planets were together. And so it really was really fascinating to see how these kind of cycles in human history come again and again, and they seem to be aligned with the planets. And I don't go all the way to saying the planets are causing these effects, but certainly they're aligned with certain cyclical effects that take place.
It's interesting, isn't it, how we keep doing the same things over and over again, you know, and the wheel turns. And it gets worse and it gets better. It gets worse and it gets better. Yeah, yeah. You know,
yeah. And so he really gives you hope for the future, that what goes around comes around, and that it's not going to always stay the same.
Yes, exactly. And I guess different generations need to have the same kinds of lessons. So they've got to go through similar experiences.
It would seem so. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So you book number 2. I mean, this book has been described as an entire library's worth of scholarship in a single volume.
Sure is.
Yeah. The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth, published in 2008.
I have to say, when I read this book, I put little sticky markers on every, concept that was fascinating to me. And there's so many sticky markers now. I wish I had it to show you. It's just unbelievable. But yes, it's a sweeping history of all sort of spiritual traditions of the world, not the Abrahamic religions, but all of sort of the secret societies, the mystery schools, and the information that maybe the masses wasn't supposed to know. And this always fascinated me, those Egyptian mystery schools. I feel like I have a connection somehow to that. And this book kind of put it all together in a really fabulous way, I thought. And it's Western. It's the Western esoteric traditions. It's not Eastern. Same with Cosmos and Psyche. It's very much focused on the Western world's development. Not to say the Eastern world doesn't have anything to do with it, but sometimes it's easier to focus on one or the other.
Yeah. Have you ever studied with a mystery school?
Not officially. I get nervous about joining groups. I feel like, oh my gosh, what are they gonna make me do? Or what am I gonna have to commit to or believe in? And so, no, I've never done that. But what I called about a 2.5-year period where I was taking lots and lots of courses, and I called it my spiritual boot camp. But you could also call it my own personal mystery school, where I just really wanted to find out, who am I? What is going on besides this body I'm walking around in? And it's a really amazing journey.
Yeah, I've never done it myself. I've been attracted to it, but I think if I went to one, I'd have to go to several, because, it implies that there are some mysterious tools, that we don't know about, that we've forgotten about, and only certain people can get access to them. And so far, I don't know what those tools are, so I'm not sure you could find them in one school.
Well, and I'm not sure the modern mystery schools are the same as the ancient mystery schools that really fascinated me. I'm just not sure. So.
Yeah. Book number 3, Fingerprints of the Gods, The Evidence of Earth's Lost Civilization by Graham Hancock, published in 1995.
This one I read immediately after it came out, because I had been in search of the mystery of Atlantis. I wanted to know what happened to that continent that's talked about, that Plato talks about, and it pops up, there's evidence of it. Anyway, I got into the kind of mystery of all that, like so many have over centuries. And I would go to the library, back when people did that, I would go to the library and look for books, and I wasn't satisfied. They weren't giving me, I think one book was saying, Santorini, the Greek island in Greece, was Atlantis, but it just wasn't big enough. Some things didn't fit. And so Graham Hancock, when I learned about this book, I bought it immediately. And he took a look at all the kind of ancient structures around the world and kind of cast a new way of explaining why they exist. And other archaeologists that he talks about in there, have dated the Sphinx, for example, was built 12,500 years ago, not just a few thousand years ago by Egyptians, but potentially another culture.
Yes.
And this is what really fascinates me, is that we are not who we think we are. I believe this, I was looking at this back in the 90s. Now, flash forward 30 years, there are countless books about this topic and many, many people talking about this. But that wasn't the case in the 90s. To me, this was revolutionary. And to me, Graham Hancock has written many, 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 many other books. I've gotten them signed at a book event I went to. It was very exciting. But that first book to me is still the foundation of it all. That really opens your mind to, is our history really what we think it is? So we have the archaeological history that he goes into and the geological history. And then the book before that was sort of the spiritual history. And then Rick Tarnas's was kind of the cosmic metaphysical history. So that's why those three books kind of go together for me.
Yeah. I remember buying that back in the day, and those books were so precious because they weren't that common. You couldn't find them absolutely everywhere. It wasn't so popular, and you always felt like you were living a little bit out on the edge.
Yeah, it was so refreshing, I would say. Finally, someone's looking at this in a different way. And Graham Hancock is a journalist. He's not a scientist. And so he's used to pulling different things together, whereas scientists are usually just in one specialty, not pulling together lots of different.
He knows how to do his research. Yeah. So book number 4 is somewhat different. Death is But a Dream, Finding Hope and Meaning at Life's End by Christopher Kerr, published in 2020. What attracted you to this book?
Well, I work with Dr. Eben Alexander. He's also my husband, but we started out, working together, and I learned a lot about near-death experiences because he had a pretty profound experience. I know you've had him on your program. Lots of people know his story. But I wasn't really that interested in near-death experiences when I met him. I was more interested in what's happening here, what's happening now. And any interest I had in near-death experiences were, how does that affect how I live my life now? And so I spent many years with Eben telling people about near-death experiences. And then it was in 2020 when I got an email about this book, Death is But a Dream. And I immediately ordered it. I did not know who Dr. Kerr was. And when I read the book, I was thinking he has just validated all of the information that near-death experiencers have told us. And what's different about Dr. Kerr's book is many, many hospice workers, nurses, researchers have written about what happens on someone's deathbed. But all of that research, I think Peter Fenwick was one of the premier researchers who recently left us, the physical world, I think last year. But Peter Fenwick was sort of the beginning of all this, but he will admit readily that he was only relying on observations of these patients as they were dying. And in scientific research, the first rule is do no harm. And so to research people as they were dying was kind of seen as maybe, sacrosanct, leave them alone. But Dr. Kerr found, he's a hospice doctor in Buffalo, New York, he found that when he talked to patients about their experiences, it actually helped them. And so he convinced the Yale Institution Review Board to let him do an actual scientific study. And so everyone who was in the hospice center at the time who agreed to be part of the study, he would interview them every day. And he had certain questions he would ask, but he would also film them telling their stories. And what he found is that 86% of the people in the study had some sort of end-of-life dream or vision. And he called them dreams if the person appeared to be asleep. He called them visions if the person appeared to be awake. But really, he said it was this kind of different state, kind of what near-death experiencers described. 99% of the people who had an experience described them as more real than real. Exactly the words that near-death experiencers say. They say it's not like this world. It's sort of hyper real. It's very hard for them to describe. But that's what these hospice patients are going through. They're having lived experiences, and those experiences involve reuniting with deceased relatives who come back to help guide them to the next journey. They're feeling like they're some kind of movement from darkness to light. They feel like they're getting ready for a journey. They don't necessarily know why or where they're going, but they know it's not the end. They get a sense that there's a next step. And it's when their deceased loved ones arrive, that's when it's getting closer to the time of death. And so many of us have heard these anecdotes, of grandma saw grandpa. Oh my gosh, she's having a hallucination.
Yeah.
And it's not a hallucination as it happens. These people are having the most vivid lived experiences of their lives. And many of them are related to reestablishing bonds of love. They're also beginning a life review, which we learn about in near-death experiences. They start revisiting parts of their life. He tells amazing stories. I don't want to get too into it, but this book to me, this told me this is what happens when I die, much, much more than the near-death experiencers do. Now, it's all the same information, but he compiles all of these actual death stories, not near-death. And they're the same experiences that near-death people are having. And so to me, it's very, very comforting that I didn't think that my life would come to an end. I've always known that I have a soul that would continue on. It's a knowing I think many children have, and then it's taken away from us. But somehow mine wasn't taken away. And my soul will continue. And this book is the most comforting book. And he talks about how love is the most important thing, just like near-death experiencers. So that's what's waiting for us. But more importantly, how we live our lives now. When we look at what happens during a life review, we realize, oh, maybe we should apologize for something that we said to someone else, or a behavior that we have that maybe we might want to adjust. And it's not about correcting other people's behaviors. It's about looking at your own behaviors. And so to me, that's the most important lesson from near and actual death experiences, is that you're going to go through a life review. You're going to judge how you treated people. So why not get a hold of that information now? And that means your life review will be all about the love that you shared with others, instead of all of the regrets that you might have had about how you treated people. So.
Yeah, it's amazing how afraid people are of death, and yet there's so much evidence around now. Just the other day there was something on my news feed about science now knows that consciousness survives after death, etc. So it's out there in the mainstream now.
Well, what's happening, the Division of Perceptual Studies at University of Virginia is about 20 minutes away from where we live. And what's so exciting is they have been studying this for decades, honestly. They started the International Association of Near-Death Studies. They study reincarnation. They are starting to now, they've been very much under the radar because they, are associated with a university. But they're starting to do media. They're starting to talk to people. And it's being done in a very respectful, scientific fashion. And this kind of topic often is made fun of or made light of. And it's not to be made light of. It's a very interesting, fascinating thing of study.
So book number 5 is The Convoluted Universe by Dolores Cannon, published in 2001. Favorite of mine.
Ah, good. Yes. Before I met Eben, remember I said I didn't really read about near-death experiences. What I was most fascinated about reading about was hypnosis sessions, starting with Brian Weiss, of course, Many Lives, Many Masters, the Yale psychiatrist who figured out what was going on. Dolores Cannon is not an academic, but she started doing hypnosis, I think, back in the 50s. And I think also she's deceased now, died several years ago, sadly. But she wrote a whole series of books about different hypnosis sessions that she would have with people. And my favorite was the Convoluted Universe series. There's actually 5 of them, because those were the most interesting stories that didn't really fit into categories. And it really opens your mind, whether you believe what people are reporting from their past life memories to be true or not. It isn't important to me. It's what are the possibilities? What is it that could maybe be true? And just reading about all of that, you find what resonates with you. And Dolores Cannon does a very sweeping job of covering hypnosis subjects. So I wanted to include one of her books, and that was the lead off of my favorite series. So.
And number 6 is quite different again. The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein, 2008. Obviously, this one's a movie as well, isn't it?
It did become a movie, and I read, that's probably the most recent book that I've read, and that is a fictional book. But, you said what inspires you, and I am such a dog lover. This book is about a dog, and it's from the dog's point of view and the humans that he is a family with. And it's just a beautiful kind of story of how a dog's perspective might be in your life, how it might be, interacting with you. And the way it ends up is I think there's some death. He loses his, the woman owner, guardian, whatever people like to use. And it ends up being a story of potential reincarnation where the dog, I'm giving away the ending, but he comes back as a boy and he has the same name. I think his name is Enzo. They're in Italy at the Ferrari, placed in a real race car. Anyway, it's just a really touching, sweet, sweet book. And every word just touched my soul. And that book is the fiction book that I remember the most of all the books I've read, besides my childhood secret garden.
Yeah. The dogs have a way. Who was it? Alan Cohen, I think, the author, who he wrote a book once that was really interesting because he was talking about what the things that we do that a dog would never do, because they just get on with things. And here we are licking our wounds over something, and if they're not happy, they just take themselves off. They don't make everybody else unhappy. And it was really interesting to look at, human behavior through a dog's eyes.
Yeah, really fascinating. And anyone who's a dog lover would absolutely love this book.
Yeah.
So.
Number 7. Now, this one comes up a lot. It is a very popular book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, published in 2007.
Yeah, the reason I like this book, I know it's popular, but I had to include it because Michael Singer does such an amazing job of explaining meditation, the observer within, how to let go, how to release those things that don't bother you. And he does such a great job of explaining it from a secular perspective without, a Buddhist spin or a, Christian spin or maybe a New Age spin. He just tells it like it is. And I really like that about his book. Very, very clear. We often use, credit him with that phrase, the annoying roommate, that little voice inside that can't seem to quiet. I just thought his book, I've read, is it Alan Watts, The Art of Zen, I think, other really fabulous books out there. But for me, Michael Singer, just modern, quick, simple. Oh, that's what that means. And it just was really refreshing and short and easy to read. So
book number 8 is new to the library, and it's new to me as well. Energize the Heart in 4 Dimensions by Karen and Susanna Bear, published in 2007.
Yes. Well, I mentioned earlier that spiritual boot camp I put myself through. I was taking lots and lots of courses, and Karen and Susanna Bear are actually part of a Sufi lineage through oh gosh, what is it? Pir Inayat Khan, I think, the son of, can't remember the other, somebody, Inayat Khan. Yes. His quote is on our website, something about sound. But so I took courses from this couple. And that book especially is what we were focused on. They have all different ways of breathing in and out of the heart. And to me, I was really, really interested in getting more aware of my heart. And it's not simple if you shut it down sometime in your life, like I did when my parents were divorced at age 7. And I was asked, who do you want to live with, your mom or your dad? And I thought that was nuts. And I said, oh, well, mom, of course. And my dad had been in Vietnam for a few years. He hadn't been around. So why would I choose him? But I kind of shut off the idea that I needed him. And I much later in life realized I had shut down my heart. I didn't need him to love me. And so that's a pretty significant relationship to deny that you need. But that's how I managed it. And I think all of us do similar things. And so I had to release all of that. And it wasn't simple. When I tried to meditate, I would just start to cry sometimes, and I didn't know why. And when I learned this meditation of focusing on the heart, matching my breaths to the beat of the heart, that's when the crying started to be more productive, because then I was actually realized I was releasing things that would then be replaced with other things. And all of this focus on the heart came from Heart Math, who I'm sure you've heard of in Northern California. They've been studying the heart. And what Paran and Susanna did is they used that science, that data, to teach their techniques in their class. And so it was a little bit less intimidating. Although at one point I was asked to commit to the lineage and then I would get a special name. And that's what I mean, where I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm ready to do that, because I still wanted to expose myself to other spiritual traditions. I didn't want to just commit to one. That's not really my my thing. I want to know what they all do and then find the commonalities, the universal truths. That's what's interesting to me. And Energize the Heart in 4 Dimensions really taught me very specific techniques about how to become more aware of that electromagnetic field in the heart that Heart Math talks about. They have exercises too, but this couple goes a little deeper. And that book was really, really helpful at sort of cracking open this idea that I'm made of love. We all are. And I found it. I found that love from within. I know how to tap into it now. I know that I'm a part of a bigger force of love. And it was that book and their workshops that really helped me to get there. So.
Book number 9, The Secret of the Soul, Using Out-of-Body Experiences to Understand Our True Nature, by William Borman, published in 2001.
Yes, there are a number of books out there about out-of-body experience. Robert, I can't remember his name. Pardon me? No, not Bob Monroe. Robert Bruce, he's an Australian. He wrote a book called Astral Dynamics. That was the first book I read. But I liked Secret of the Soul by William Borman better. He talks about different techniques to really get your energy out of your body. And this is something that he and others say happens to us every night when we fall asleep anyway. We just don't remember. And so this might be related to our dream space, and maybe when we, recall meeting people that we know in our dreams or something like that. But when his books arrived, this particular book arrived in the mail, I had done some practice with out of body before, but I wanted to try his techniques. It arrived in the mail. I read the back cover, went to bed that night, and the next morning I had an out of body experience. And I can't tell you how many other people have said that's happened to them too. It's almost like they open the possibility, yes, but they're not trying. And then their awareness just goes, oh, look at this, look at this. And it was pretty amazing. Now, out-of-body experiences are not necessarily something I crave or that I seek out on an ongoing basis. It was a phase I went through. And once I was able to achieve these out-of-body experiences, I was quite satisfied that, I had discovered, yes, I'm more than my physical body. And then I used that information to help me live my life. And so sometimes the glamour of these spiritual experiences can take over, from what the real, business of living is about, which is our relationships and our connections. And so I try not to be too ascetic when I do these things, meaning stepping out of the world. I like to stay in the world. And one Sufi tradition that I learned, actually not taught by Paran and Susanna Baer, was that you were to escape this world, to find the oneness. And to me, I remember arguing with a friend of mine who did this practice. And I said, no, you want to get that oneness and bring it back here, not escape not escape the world, but bring it back here. And so it's really interesting how when you get exposed to these different traditions, you see how people approach them in different ways. So it's all just very fascinating.
Well, book 10, your last one, this is a book I read back in the 2000s, and it just left such a big impression on me. It changes everything. The Secret Life of Plants, fabulous book, a fascinating account of the physical, emotional, and Spiritual Relations Between Plants and Man by Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird, published in 1989.
Yes, I read this book probably in the 90s, and fascinating, just as you said. And I'm a gardener. I guess I'm just realizing my first inspirational book was Secret Garden, and here's The Secret Life of Plants. Isn't that a nice circle we've gone in? But yeah, plants are alive. They feel us. They know our emotions. The story in the book that's most fascinating to me is when someone would light a match as a threat to maybe, they were going to burn the plant would scream or make a big reaction on whatever they were doing to read the energy of the plant. And so, yes, they know what's going on. And so when you hear about talking to your plants, playing music for your plants, feeling love when you're planting your seeds and all of that, I think they feel that. They know that's true. And it's the world of nature. I've also taken plant communication classes, and there's no books on that, just courses, but or actually there probably are books, but none that I've read to recommend. But you can really connect with plants in really spiritual ways. I remember I spent a weekend and we were doing plant communication. We were asked to go outdoors and find a plant. There was a garden we went into, and I was drawn to plants with heart-shaped leaves. And I ended up finding out a number of plants that have heart-shaped leaves. And when I connected with them, I would feel that childlike joy and innocence. Someone else in the class was very drawn to the walnut tree, and she was having a complete opposite, more serious grounding experience. And so different plants can really offer up different energy based on, what our mood is in that moment. I even learned in that course that plants, helpful medicinal plants, will sometimes pop up in your yard if you could possibly use them. Of course, most of us don't realize, and we think, oh, there's that weed we need to get rid of. And we wouldn't know what to do, how to process that plant anyway. But it's how interesting that plants know us and they interact with us in ways we don't even realize.
Have you ever experienced the music of the plants?
I have heard, not specifically, but I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Where they put the little electrodes onto the plant and the plant almost sings. I actually was present at, it was like a concert. It was at Damanhur, the Italian eco community. And we had in our party, we had a woman who was a flautist, and she brought her flute with her. And when we went into the sacred woods to listen to the, to the plants, and they were, had the electrodes put on them, she would play a few notes and stop. And then the plant would make a noise, and then she would, and it was going back and forth. And you realized, this wasn't just coincidence. The plant was responding, and it was just beautiful, beautiful.
I think I remember reading about that from Damanhur. I've read a lot about Damanhur. I've never been there, but how wonderful that you were there.
Yeah, amazing. Yes. If only we understood all of the things. I remember there's a piece in the book where they actually did some experiments with, what do you call it? When they take, I've forgotten the name of it, but they put a picture of a field that was had a lot of problems with boll weevils, and they put it into one of these boxes, and they would send in energy to the box, and the boll weevils disappeared from the field except for one corner. And when they looked at the picture, that corner had been torn off the picture.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It is, yeah. And that's the kind of book I like. Anyway, that's your 10, and your book choices really make it clear that you're drawn to evidence that consciousness doesn't stop at the skull, and that's a perfect bridge to your own work, using sound to prove what philosophy only hints at. So you and Eben often say sound is the carrier of consciousness. How did that idea first take root in you?
I'm not sure I've used sound as the carrier of conscious specifically, but I know the concept you're talking about here. I mean, everything is a vibration. And so sound is a vibration. And so it's no wonder that we would resonate with certain sounds based on our energetic makeup. But I really got interested in sound. It was, again, during that period of exploration, the focus on the heart meditation was one of the keys. The other key, I'll just say the two keys, was sound. And it was a specific kind of sound. At first, so many of us, we love hearing like a crystal bowl or maybe a gong or a brass bowl, just that whoom. And you can feel the vibration if you're in the room of that gong or something. So sound baths are really common. I had gone to these kind of sound baths and felt those vibrations. And what they do is they sort of capture your attention. They help you to focus. And I think that's why Tibetans use brass bowls in their, meditation practice, and many, many meditation practices use such sounds. But binaural beat recordings, interestingly, are a digital form of the same, I'll call it technology, because when you record a brass bowl, you'll hear this sort of steady ooh kind of sound and then all the harmonics of that. But then underneath all of that, you'll hear this wah 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 going on. And it's that wah 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 wah. That's the bouncing off the sides of the wall that you're hearing, the wall of the bowl. Those are binaural beats. And I didn't know that until my business partner is Kevin Kossi. He's the co-founder of Sacred Acoustics. He's our audio engineer. He's the real genius behind all of the recordings. But this kind of sound can really help you get into expanded states more easily. I don't want to go on and on. You may have a pathway you're guiding me towards.
No, I'm just, got some questions about Sacred Acoustics because, for me, this is it. This is it. Sound is the medicine of the future. We know that. And I think some of the evidence that's coming out now is so exciting. So, yes, I could talk about sound all day.
Well, that's fascinating. So this particular type of, I've been exposed to all kinds of sound. Sound I use to help myself meditate because I couldn't do it. I sat there and I thought, okay, I'll sit here for 10 minutes. I'll focus on my breath, as they say. And then about 2 minutes would go by. I would open my eyes. Oh my God, only 2 minutes. And it just seemed like an eternity as I would sit there. And at the same time, my thoughts were just constant. I was having conversations. I was, remembering things from the day before, imagining things in the future. I thought, how am I supposed to stay in the present? But sound helped me. So like I say, it was, gongs or something like that at first. But binaural beats are a form of that type of sound, like I just described. And so I met Kevin Kossi when we were at a workshop at the Monroe Institute, and we were listening to these kinds of sounds. And he let me know that he wanted to make his own binaural beats. And I thought he was nuts. I thought, what are you, an audio musician? He's like, no, I'm not a musician. But he was a mechanical electrical engineer. And he had a lot of technical knowledge. And so he found out that I had a vast library of different types of meditation music, including lots of binaural beats that I had been listening to. And so that kind of began our partnership of taking apart what other people had done. And at first, he would create recordings that only for us, our personal kind of journeys that we would go on, we would listen to these recordings at the same time. He was in New York. I was in Baltimore at the time. But we listen at the same time and then get on the phone and tell each other what just happened. And in that way, we could tweak the recordings for our personal use. And so as we did this more and more, he realized that the only way to make them better was to recreate them from scratch himself. And, we were copying and pasting and adding tracks and things. So he started making them himself. And that began the journey of Sacred Acoustics. Once we created recordings that were original and unique, that's when we met Dr. Eben Alexander, my husband, and he listened to these recordings. He was the first person, I'll say human, because our dogs had heard them over speakers, but he was the first human who heard these recordings besides me and Kevin. And his book hadn't even come out yet, Proof of Heaven. And he said, oh my gosh, I want to write about this in my book. I want to give you guys credit for all of this. This is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. He's very enthusiastic, as you know. And I said, well, let's not have you write about it in your book because we haven't made them yet. And his book was ready to, go to press. And I said, oh my gosh. So what ended up happening was when the book came out, Dr. Oz invited him onto the program, and he wanted to do a demonstration of binaural beats. And so Kevin and I were behind the scenes, but they played this recording for a woman, or actually I was with the woman. We played the recording. We got her brain waves. We had a little brainwave reading device so we could show what was happening. And she said to me, oh my gosh, when I meditate, I often will talk to my deceased mother. It's a really great opportunity for me to speak to her. But today, when I was listening to this recording, was the first time she talked back to me.
Wow.
So that was pretty amazing. And that is the story. She went on they reenacted the experience for the cameras, and she told that story. And everyone wanted to know what in the world was she listening to. And Dr. Oz had allowed us to put a link on their homepage for the 24 hours of the episode the day it aired. And we got 5,000 people responded in the first week or two. And that was kind of the beginning. We thought, I guess we better make a recording now to offer these people. And that's how we got started. But Eben really gave us the exposure, but Kevin and I really are the ones who did all of the work creating the recordings. So
I know so many people, and I'll include myself among it. It's really hard, for us to meditate. And so to have some music that will actually help, is valuable.
So I can explain how it works if you like.
Please do. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not like regular music that you would hear. It's not at all. And in fact, binaural beats are created by taking two carrier frequencies, and those are the sounds that we hear. And it's one sound in one ear, a slightly different sound in the other ear, say 200 hertz, 206 hertz. And it's that difference, 6 hertz, that is matched up to a brainwave state. So 6 hertz is in the theta range. And so many of our recordings will include 6 hertz frequencies. Also popular is a 4 hertz frequency, right around 4 hertz, because that's the border between delta and theta, the border between awake and asleep. And this is really what they call the hypnagogic state. We're all in that state as we're falling asleep at night. Your body's getting relaxed, but your mind is still working. You might start to have some imagery or something. I know sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I'll have some crazy wild dream, and then I'll open my eyes and really only 1 minute has gone by. And later when I have dreams, they're different. They're not quite so sudden. And at any rate, that's the hypnagogic space. So our recordings can help people get into that space. They can help support meditation. They can help support focus if you're reading, studying. They can also help support sleep. But we're mostly talking about, the meditation experience, getting into these expanded states where your body is profoundly relaxed, but your mind is still aware. And this is the state that you're in when you have an out-of-body experience too. And a lot of people, we recommend, just listening. If you've never listened to this kind of thing before, you want to just listen and see what happens. Don't worry about anything at first. But once you see how you respond, you can use all kinds of intention, other techniques that you've learned in other settings, and these sounds can potentially help you get started, or they can help you go even deeper if you already have a practice.
Yeah. I've been talking to John Stewart Reed quite a bit about some of his experiments, and it is absolutely fascinating. I don't know if he's done it yet, but he was going to bring out a white paper, and he was working with low frequency sounds and blood cells, red blood cells. And he was finding that the red blood cells regenerate when, low frequency sounds are played to them. And
so low frequency. We can't hear under 20 hertz. So no. Are you talking about sounds below 20 hertz?
Yeah.
Oh,
and he actually gave me a PDF that I put up on YouTube for how you could And he was talking about the heterodyne effect that you get, and you can only get it listening live. It's not something that you could record. But he was saying you get a pair of headphones that, start at 5 hertz, and you get lossless music, and you play that. What actually happens, that the two together create this heterodyne effect, and
But you
that
can't hear it.
you can't hear
You
it.
can't hear it.
No.
Yeah, so it's like ultrasound or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he said it's actually helping, people reduce inflammation in their body. This is the part of sound that I find really fascinating.
Well, binaural beats, because we can't hear below 20 hertz, that's why, you can't hear a 6 hertz signal. Like you say, you can play it, but you can't hear it. But when you hear the 2 signals in that wah, 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 that seems to be the driver, the mechanism. But sound is incredibly flexible. And I can't, and there are so many ways to apply sound to healing and other effects that I don't know that anyone could ever put them all in an encyclopedia, right? Because there's the human voice, there's all the different instruments, there's the trees, the plants, so many ways that sound is part of our world. I mean, even the sounds we can't hear. That's really fascinating.
Yeah. I used to buy quite a lot of the Hemisync recordings many years ago. And they had some great ones, like for kids with ADHD, so that they could focus and sleep, etc. So yeah, it's such an exciting area to be in.
Yeah.
So what are you planning to do? I mean, what are you working on at the moment? You must stay right at the edge, I'm sure, of the latest research.
Well, one thing to point out is that the binaural beats that we create don't only contain binaural beats. And that makes ours a little different than just standard binaural beats. One thing is we include monaural beats. And what happened when we added monaural beats in a particular way that only Kevin could describe, what happened was, instead of just hearing, since you've heard Hemisync, you just kind of hear it on both sides of your head. When we added the monaural beats, it sounded like it was coming from all around you, more holographic. So it was a more satisfying experience. And then many, many binaural beats, they're kind of harsh to listen to. They're not normal music. And so often they're masked with white noise, pink noise, maybe rain, surf, other kinds of sounds. Sometimes it's music. But what we found is that if we chose carrier frequencies, the frequencies that you can hear that comprise the binaural beats, when we chose frequencies that were all harmonically compatible, then they started to sound like music. And I'm not sure any binaural beat producer at that time was doing that. I don't know now. There's so many producers out there. I don't know what everybody's doing. But that was very innovative technique that Kevin has continued to refine with different kinds of techniques that he just adds as we go. And he calls our technology neural helix. And we're up to, instead of Hemisync, we're up to neural helix 2.0 now, because he keeps adding little techniques. So that's happening ongoing. And we do have a new release that we're just sending to get manufactured by the CD. We do sell CDs and the MP3, high quality MP3 recordings, because lots of people still want CDs, apparently. And yeah, so once the CD is finished, then we'll release it to our website. This one incorporates a new technique for the first time that Kevin developed, since you're asking about the cutting edge. But this recording, it's called Passage, because it is based on Newgrange, the sacred site in Ireland. And one of our kind of dreams when we invented the name Sacred Acoustics for this was to actually go to sacred sites, take EEG readings while we're meditating, and use frequencies that are associated with that site. And so this is the first time we've actually accomplished that. And so Passage is definitely directly related to Newgrange. And that site, they believe, was used for rituals related to death and to birth, sort of transitional periods. And so that's why we call it Passage. So it's going to be sort of a helps you through the next stage of your spiritual journey. But we have lots of cool sound effects in this, new techniques, and that'll be out sometime in November 2025. I don't know how long this will be online, so I just want to say time stamp that. Probably November 2025, maybe December 2025. After Thanksgiving, it'll be ready to come out. So that's really exciting. We're very much looking forward to that one. And Kevin actually found we do sometimes hire musicians to help with some of the tracks because we're not musicians. And he found a drummer in New York that he's really happy working with. So now he's working on some drumming tracks that should be really interesting, because anytime you can incorporate actual music to the digital frequencies, it gives it, and we don't every time, but anytime you can, it just gives it a depth, a different kind of experience, because humans like listening to natural music more than digital music. Yeah. And so.
Yeah. Jeffrey Thompson, I think, he's done a lot of work with sound and healing. And I believe at one point that he was actually he was given a license to use some sounds that NASA had captured.
I have that whole series. Yeah.
That's amazing.
I snatched that up as soon as I could. Yeah, it's really fascinating. He took actual sounds from space and then added his music. But these Jeffrey Thompson has a huge, he was one of the people I had a number of his work. Jonathan Goldman is, there's so many of them out there.
Yeah.
But Jeffrey Thompson is incredibly innovative, I have to say. He has such a broad range. I'm not sure he's making new things these days. I'm just not sure. But I know he was also working with sound beds.
Yes. Yes. And chairs.
Where you could put the sound
for people in chemo. Yeah. They actually found that they could give less chemo for the same kind of results, and people were much more comfortable.
I've been in talks with hospice centers, with cancer centers, and with someone in the the hospital or center will be interested, and they'll contact me, and I'll get started in conversation with people, and then something happens where someone else on the committee says, nah, that's too strange or something. But I'm absolutely willing to provide recordings for centers who want to use them in that way. Would just be fascinating to take it deeper if anyone else is interested. But it's kind of hard to get conservative kind of medical places to be open to these things. It's starting to happen, but you need to have a champion who really will sell you on the inside. You can't just go in and try to sell yourself to these people. It's kind of nutty.
Just this morning, I saw on my news feed, it was an article about some of the ice, that's breaking away now, pieces of ice that had never, and they were recording sounds. They could hear, it was almost like the ice was singing. Wonder what that would sound like.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There was also a sound, I think, that NASA released actually, it's on our recording Event Horizon. There was a sound NASA released, and it's escaping me now, but something about a star exploding or a supernova or something. And we include it in our Event Horizon recording, if anyone's interested. That one's a little wacky. So once you start listening to different sounds, sometimes I'll say they are a little strange, not like normal music. So just be open and prepared. Each of us are slightly different. And so different recordings are going to be more resonant to some of us than others. Some people will say, oh, this is my favorite, and someone else can't even listen to it. So don't worry if something doesn't resonate with you. Just keep going. Find something that does.
So since you've been involved with sound, and I don't know how long that is, what have you learned about consciousness and sound?
Well, sound is I would say there's many things to learn. So I'll start with this. It's an excellent vehicle for connecting to that greater consciousness that is sometimes elusive if we're upset. And, Some people will say to me, I want to feel that joy all the time. And I said, well, do you want to get your shopping done? Because if you're in joy, you're not going to want to do those tasks. And people, I think, have kind of unrealistic expectations of how they'll actually change or how they'll actually be different. But just opening yourself to that greater connection through sound can be so helpful, because you learn more about who you are. You learn more about what you're connected to. When I connect with sound, I find that even without sound, two kind of connections, I could say. Sometimes I'll connect with that love and I'll just feel this incredible emotion and connection and feeling and just everything is okay in the universe. Other times, and I call that the universal heart. Other times I'll connect to what I've come to call the universal mind, which is emptier. And it's almost like people sometimes call that the void, and they get a little nervous because there's not as much going on. But that to me is a source of comfort because nothing else is going on and there's no expectations. Nobody's trying to say you need to be doing this or that. You just are. And it's different. So, and I'm sure there's even other qualities of connection that I haven't named as specifically, but it's all just different, and different types of sound can help you have those different kinds of connections. And so this to me is how sound is related to consciousness, but also this idea that everything is a vibration. We're made up of vibrations. Sound is a vibration. And so that's why you mentioned our book, Living in a Mindful Universe. Chapter 9 is called Riding the Wave of Consciousness, because you can use that sound. We recommend when you start listening, many of our recordings contain what we call Om frequencies. So if you make that sound, use your voice to create a vibration. Om, just doesn't have to fit. The music doesn't have to be harmonic or anything. Just make that vibrational sound. Lower pitches will put you more in your heart area. Higher pitches will put you more up in your sort of third eye area. But experiment with making those sounds. You create that vibration, and then that vibration sort of latches on to the sounds of Sacred Acoustics and takes you on that ride. So that's one way you could put it.
Yeah. Do you think that, I had an experience in an airport a couple of years ago where I really became aware of the noise and the conflicting noises with music coming out of different shops and restaurants and people and tannoys and announcements being made. And it was like an assault on the senses. And it made me think about, wow, what must it have been like to live, 100 years ago, when you didn't have these sounds blasted at you and you could just hear what, was natural to hear.
Yeah. I live in a pretty rural area, and so it's like that here. And it is very different than living in a suburb or a city where there's just constant sound. I once lived on a corner in a city where there was a traffic signal, and it was houses. It wasn't apartments. And I didn't realize this would happen. But the first night I slept there, it was just nothing but traffic and loud music when people would stop at the traffic signal. And I had to set up speakers and play binaural beats on both sides of my bed to sleep. And it did help. For 2 years when I lived there, that's the only way I could sleep, to sort of mask that sound. But when you mention that sort of cacophony of sound in an airport, you can turn your awareness to all of that and notice the cacophony. But many, many, many of us are quite skilled at speaking to the person sitting next to us in that airport. So all of that noise can be going on, but we're able to focus right in on that person and hear only what they're saying. And that's kind of like meditation.
Yeah.
I'm realizing when you said that, I thought of that analogy, because you're kind of shutting down all of those external stimuli and really just focusing what is. And what is your awareness. That's it. And that can be a little scary at first. It was for me. Like, oh no, what's in there? And it's all good though.
Do you ever play some of your CDs to your dogs?
Certain ones. I took Healing Touch for Animals, and we learned how to use tuning forks to help animals, and horses and dogs specifically. But what we learned is that animals have such sensitive hearing ranges that they don't hear music and sounds the same way we do. So they only had a narrow range of tuning forks that they suggested that we use. And they had created special music for like animal shelters. And it was really different. Kevin used to have 2 greyhounds. And when he's working in his New York, Manhattan office with his 2 greyhounds, they're laying on the dog beds, and he's doing this all over speakers. And so, yes, his dogs have become quite accustomed to the sounds. I know when I would chant the Om sound, one dog would snuggle up with me, the other dog would leave the room. So I think that dogs and cats are probably as unique as people, but you want to be careful when you play any sounds for your animals because they do have a different hearing system. So
our last question, this is a question that we ask every single guest. Steve Jobs famously gave the people who attended his memorial service a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. What book would you want to give to the people at your memorial service?
My goodness. Well, I'm just looking at my list of 10. I have to go to Death is But a Dream. That book.
Very appropriate occasion.
Yeah, it just really, and I wasn't even thinking of it as a funeral, but it just, if I were to recommend one book to anyone, I just think it's so mind-opening, and it's based on actual interviews of people who are dying and not just experiences that they've had that they're coming back to tell us about. It just seems a lot more real and grounded in science, which is what so many people in the Western world need to have to tell them something is true before it can be thought to be true. And so that's why I find that book to be so helpful. And it's written in such a beautiful fashion. Dr. Kerr had a wonderful helper, and he is a beautiful, eloquent speaker. I've met him now. And I told him, you validated everything that happened in near-death experiences. And he goes, what are you talking about? I don't study near-death experiences. I said, well, you do now. And he doesn't want to learn about near-death experiences because he wants his research to stay pure. He wants it to be not influenced by all of that. And that's what makes his work so amazing, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's a good book to give because it's something that's relevant to every single one of us.
Sure enough, because we're all going to die.
Yeah, we're all going to take that passage. Karen Newell, thank you so much. We really appreciate you adding your list of 10 best spiritual books to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for asking. I really enjoyed it.
You're so welcome. So it seems to me that Karen's entire body of work points to one enduring truth. When we quiet the mind, the universe begins to speak in its own language, vibration, which makes me wonder if every pulse of sound is an echo of that larger intelligence. What might we learn if we listened with our heart instead of our ears? Karen Newell is co-founder of Sacred Acoustics and co-author with Eben Alexander III of Living in a Mindful Universe. For more information about her work, books, courses, and recordings, visit sacredacoustics.com. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. Thanks for joining me and Karen Newell for another 10 Best Journey. I'll be back next week with more insights and inspiration from the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, stay curious and remember, you've got the best truth detector there is. So keep that No BS meter in your gut turned on.
If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, you'll love our other shows. The Synergy Sessions, where leading-edge thinkers collide in bold, unscripted dialogues that ignite new possibilities. Between Realms and Reason, where we journey into the mysterious consciousness, energy, and the hidden layers of reality, where science converges with spirit in ways you've never imagined. And the No BS Spiritual Book Club, where leading-edge new thought speakers, teachers, authors, and luminaries who've walked this path before you share the 10 books that had the biggest impact on their life journey. All 3 shows are available on YouTube, Spotify, Substack, and all major podcast platforms. For more information, visit sedgbeer.com. That's SEDGBEER.com.